I grew up moving between places that never felt like mine. My mother, Lillian, kept us in cheap apartments around Westport when she had work or a boyfriend with steady hours, but those stretches never lasted. She'd disappear into county jail or detox or whatever truck had working heat that month, and I'd pack a duffel bag and walk to my grandmother's house near the marina. That's where the weekends blurred together. Grandma Kimberly's place off West Ocean Avenue, close enough to the harbor that I could hear foghorns at night and smell diesel when the wind came off the docks. Her house was small and salt-weathered, with a narrow kitchen that had yellow linoleum, a living room with a brown sectional, and a hallway closet that stuck because the frame had swollen from years of damp air. The laundry room connected to a back door, facing an alley that ran behind a row of small businesses. I knew that alley better than most streets in town. It was the kind of place tourists cut through looking for marina restrooms, and Grandma reminded me every visit to keep the back door locked. Grandpa Peter was still alive then, but I almost never saw him outside of early mornings and late nights. He worked odd shifts around the port of Grays Harbor and took maintenance jobs wherever boats or buildings needed him. He smelled like metal shavings and coffee, and he moved through the house like he was always late for something. Kimberly's house was the one stable place I remembered from childhood. In July 2009, I was 12. My cousins Phoenix and Megan stayed at Grandma's that weekend because their parents worked unpredictable hours and Kimberly didn't ask many questions as long as everyone ate breakfast. Phoenix was 13 and built like he'd already decided to join the Coast Guard. Megan was 5, with wide blue-gray eyes and a habit of feeding scraps to Benny, Grandma's old terrier, under the kitchen table. That Saturday morning, Kimberly made pancakes. She set the plates down and pointed at Megan with the spatula. "Stop feeding pieces to Benny." Megan froze mid-reach, a torn corner of pancake pinched between her fingers. Benny whined under the table. "He's hungry," Megan said. "He's fat," Kimberly said. "Eat your own food." Phoenix grinned and shoveled another bite into his mouth. I poured syrup over my stack and didn't say anything. Mornings at Kimberly's house had a rhythm I didn't want to interrupt. Grandpa Peter came through the kitchen before sunrise. He smelled like metal and coffee, and he carried a canvas tool bag from the mudroom. Kimberly glanced up from the stove. "You forgot your blood pressure pills again." Peter waved her off. "I'll get them later." He kissed the top of Megan's head, nodded at Phoenix and me, and left through the back door without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and the kitchen went quiet except for the sound of Benny's nails on the linoleum. Kimberly turned back to the stove. "Keep the back door locked. Tourists wander the alley looking for the marina restrooms." I nodded. Phoenix rolled his eyes. Megan fed another piece to Benny when Kimberly wasn't looking. After breakfast, Kimberly drove us to the Westport Aquarium. Megan pressed her face against the glass tanks, while Phoenix dared me to touch the sea anemones in the touch pool. I did it once, then wiped my hand on my jeans because the texture made my skin crawl. By late morning, we'd moved to the public beach near West Haven State Park. Phoenix found a piece of driftwood and threw it into the surf until his arm got tired. Megan built a lopsided sandcastle that collapsed when the tide came in. I sat on a piece of driftwood and watched the horizon darken. Rain started blowing sideways off the ocean in early afternoon. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, and Kimberly called us back to the car. Megan climbed into the back seat, shivering. "Can we get breadsticks?" she asked. Kimberly sighed. You've been asking all week. Please? Kimberly started the car. Fine, but you're eating real food first. She drove us back through town and stopped at the Pizza Hut on West Ocean Avenue. The building still had red roof panels and cracked tile in the game room. Inside, the restaurant was nearly empty. The front counter was being handled by Lexi Graham, a tired woman Grandma knew from church rummage sales. Lexi smiled when she saw us, but it didn't reach her eyes. Kimberly, didn't expect to see you today. Megan's been begging, Kimberly said. 2 pizzas, 1 cheese, 1 pepperoni. Lexi nodded and rang it up. Behind her, in the kitchen, I could see Travis Graham moving between the oven and the prep station. He was Lexi's nephew, maybe 19 or 20, and he kept glancing toward the back door like he was waiting for his smoke break. The dining room had 2 working arcade machines near the bathrooms. Phoenix fed quarters into one of them, while Megan climbed under a corner table with her jacket. I wandered toward the back of the room, where a half-open door led to the party room. Inside, stacked booster seats and old cardboard standees leaned against the wall. Behind them, wedged into the corner, sat a third arcade cabinet. It was unplugged. The side panels were painted flat black, and there was no manufacturer label, no title screen art, no coin slot markings. The joystick was red. The only visible button was white, worn yellow around the edges. A piece of masking tape covered the controls, and someone had written on it in black marker, "Do not plug in." I stared at it. The screen was dusty but not cracked. The cabinet looked old but not broken. Lexi's voice came from behind me. "Don't touch that one." I turned. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "It was here before I started," she said, "and Peter was asked twice to haul it away. He never did." I frowned. "Why not?" Lexi shrugged. "You'd have to ask him." She walked back to the counter. I looked at the cabinet again, then followed her out. Phoenix was still playing one of the working machines, and Megan had built a fort under the table. Kimberly stood near the front door, digging through her purse. She pulled out a small orange pill bottle and held it up. "I forgot to give these to Peter this morning." Lexi glanced over. "He working at the port today?" "He's at the maintenance shed," Kimberly said. She looked at us. "Stay inside with Lexi. I'm running these to the port before the storm gets worse, then I'm stopping at shopping cart for milk and dog food." She handed me $5. "Get candy from the vending machine if you want." "Phoenix, you're in charge." "Megan, don't climb under tables." Megan was already under a table. Kimberly sighed and left through the front door into the rain. I watched her car pull out of the parking lot, then turned back toward the party room. Travis had propped open the rear hallway door to take out trash, and the smell of wet asphalt drifted in. Phoenix fed another quarter into the machine. Megan crawled out from under the table and tugged on my sleeve. "Can we play the other one?" she asked. I looked at the half-open door. The black arcade cabinet sat in the corner, silent and unplugged. The masking tape over its controls read, "Do not plug in block letters." I didn't answer her. The cabinet stayed where it was, wedged behind booster seats and standees, waiting. We ate breadsticks first, the kind that came in the red and white paper sleeve, too hot to hold at the ends, with marinara sauce that Phoenix kept dipping twice, even though Megan said that was gross. Lexi stayed at the counter, refilling napkin dispensers and watching the door like she expected someone. Travis was somewhere in the back. I could hear him moving things around in the kitchen, metal scraping tile. Phoenix finished his third breadstick and wiped his hands on his jeans. "I'm getting more quarters," he said. Megan had built a fort under the corner table using her jacket and one of the booster seats. She crawled out long enough to ask if she could have another $1, then disappeared back under when I told her no. I leaned against the wall near the 2 working arcade machines and fed quarters into the racing game until the screen told me I'd placed 5th. Phoenix played the basketball one. He was better at it than I was at anything. The storm hadn't let up. Rain hit the front windows hard enough that I could hear it over the game music. Every few minutes, the door would rattle in its frame. Lexi looked up each time like she thought someone might walk in, but no one did. Travis propped the rear hallway door open with a plastic crate. I heard him dragging something heavy toward the dumpster. Cold air blew into the dining room, and Megan stuck her head out from under the table to complain about it. Phoenix wasn't paying attention to her. He was staring past the party room doorway into the back corner where the old cabinet sat half hidden behind stacked chairs. "There's an extension cord," he said. I looked up from the racing game. "Where?" "Behind that one." He nodded toward the black cabinet, the unplugged one. I crossed the dining room and stood in the party room doorway. He was right. An orange extension cord lay coiled on the floor near the cabinet's base, tucked between the wall and a cardboard standee of a cartoon pizza slice. The cord looked newer than the cabinet. Someone had left it there on purpose. "Lexi said not to touch it," I told him. Phoenix gave me the look he always gave me when I repeated something an adult had said. Half annoyed, half like he felt sorry for me. Adults say that about everything old because they don't want to fix it. He stepped into the party room. I stayed in the doorway. Megan crawled out from under the table and followed Phoenix because she followed him everywhere. She was small enough to squeeze between the cabinet and the booster seat stack without moving anything. I heard her sneakers scuff the tile. "There's a plug back here," she said. "Don't," I said. But Phoenix was already crouching beside the cabinet, pulling the orange cord toward the wall outlet near the floor. I wanted to grab his arm. I wanted to tell him Grandma Kimberly would be back soon, and we could just eat pizza and go home. I didn't do either. I stood there and watched him push the plug into the socket. The cabinet screen came on. No startup logo, no company name, just black at first like the screen was warming up. Then the black dissolved into pixels. Green and gray blocks formed a crude top-down drawing of a room. The walls were thick gray lines. The floor was green. In the center of the screen, a small white square sat motionless. At the bottom edge, a red figure stood. It didn't move. It had no face, no details, just the red shape against the green floor. There was no title, no score, no flashing insert coin message. Phoenix touched the joystick. It was red, worn smooth at the top. When he pushed it forward, the white square slid up the screen. When he pulled it back, the square moved down. He pressed the single white button, and the square passed through a doorway into another room. I stepped closer. The new room had brown blocks arranged in rows. A blue rectangle sat against one wall. 2 smaller rooms branched off to the right. A larger rectangle filled the space at the back. I recognized it before Phoenix did. The brown blocks were tables. The blue rectangle was the soda machine. The 2 small rooms were the bathrooms. The larger one was the party room. The game was showing the Pizza Hut. "That's us," Megan whispered. Phoenix moved the joystick again. The white square slid between 2 brown table blocks, and I realized it was moving through the real dining room layout. The screen showed exactly where we were standing. I looked over my shoulder at the actual tables. then back at the cabinet. They matched. The red figure moved. It didn't wait for Phoenix to press anything. It just started walking on its own, smooth and deliberate, crossing from the bottom of the screen toward the left side. It entered a rectangle I hadn't noticed before. The kitchen. A green sprite stood beside a square, labeled with a white oven icon. The red figure walked up to it. When the two shapes touched, the green sprite collapsed. Its pixels flashed white, then gray, then disappeared into a pile of broken blocks on the floor. Travis yelled. The sound came from the real kitchen, loud and sharp, cut off halfway through by a heavy metallic crash. Something hit the floor hard enough that I felt it through my sneakers. Lexi shouted his name from the counter. "Travis?" Megan grabbed my sleeve. Phoenix stared at the screen. The red figure was still in the kitchen, standing over the collapsed green sprite. It turned slowly, facing the doorway that led to the rear hallway. "Unplug it," I said. Phoenix didn't move. "Unplug it." He bent down and yanked the orange cord from the wall outlet. The plug came free. The cord fell slack against the tile. The cabinet screen stayed on. Lexi's footsteps crossed the dining room toward the kitchen. I heard her push through the swinging door. Heard her voice go high and scared. Megan pulled on my sleeve again, harder this time, but I couldn't stop watching the screen. The game view was shifting. The Pizza Hut layout slid away, redrawing itself one pixel row at a time. The walls changed shape, the rooms rearranged. A new building appeared. It was smaller. A front room, a hallway, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a laundry room, a back door facing an alley. The floor in the kitchen was a square of mustard-colored pixels. I knew that color. I'd spilled juice on that floor last summer, and Grandma Kimberly had made me clean it with a rag that smelled like vinegar. The cabinet was showing Grandma's house. Phoenix said something I didn't hear. My ears felt stuffed with cotton. The screen kept adding details. A blue oval beside the sofa, Benny's dog bed, a small rectangle in the spare bedroom, Grandma's sewing table, a black vertical line in the hallway, where the closet door always stuck because the frame had swollen. "That's Grandma's house," I said. Megan pointed at the screen. "The little red man has a hat." I looked closer. The red figure stood in the alley now, outside the laundry room door. Its body was a dark block. Its head was a pale square, lighter than the rest. The pixels were too crude to show a face, but the square sat at an angle, like a hat brim. Phoenix shook his head. "That's impossible." It wasn't. The game knew things it shouldn't. The dog bed, the sewing table, the stuck closet. I watched the red figure take one step forward. On the screen, the back door to Grandma's house opened. The door just opened. No one touched it. No hand reached for the knob. The black rectangle that marked the door simply moved inward, and the red figure stepped through into the laundry room. I stopped breathing. The screen showed the back door opening. I yanked Phoenix's sleeve and ran. Lexi looked up from the counter as we burst out of the party room. She was halfway to the kitchen, still calling Travis's name, her voice pitched high and scared. I grabbed her sleeve as I passed. Someone went into my grandma's house. She turned, confused, mouth opening to ask what I meant, but Phoenix already had Megan by the wrist and was hauling her toward the front doors. Rain hammered the glass. I let go of Lexi and followed my cousins into the parking lot. The storm hit us like a wall. Cold water soaked through my shirt in seconds. Megan stumbled on the wet pavement, and Phoenix caught her before she fell. We cut between the Pizza Hut and the building next to it, splashing through puddles that had already pooled in the gravel. The alley stretched ahead, narrow and dark, lined with dumpsters and loading pallets slick with rain. Grandma's back porch came into view. The steps were gray wood, warped from years of damp. The door was shut. Phoenix took the steps 2 at a time. I was right behind him with Megan between us. He grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened. It shouldn't have. Grandma told me that morning to keep it locked because tourists wandered back here looking for the marina restrooms. I remembered her saying it while she poured orange juice. I remembered nodding. I didn't remember unlocking it. Phoenix stepped inside first. Water dripped off his hair onto the linoleum. The kitchen looked normal. Yellow floor, cluttered counter, dish towel hanging over the oven handle. Benny was under the table whining, his whole body pressed against the table leg like he was trying to make himself smaller. Nothing else moved. I crossed to the wall phone and picked it up. My hands were shaking so hard I had to dial twice. Grandma's cell rang 4 times, then clicked over to voicemail. Her voice asked me to leave a message. I hung up. "We should call 911, Phoenix said. I looked at him. He was standing in the doorway to the living room, shoulders tense, water pooling around his sneakers. "Travis might have just dropped something," I said. "You saw the screen." "I know, but I didn't finish. I was 12. I knew what happened when kids got police involved and adults decided the kids had overreacted. I'd seen my mom come home from county jail once and spend an hour screaming at Grandma because someone at school reported a bruise. It didn't matter that the bruise came from me falling off my bike. What mattered was that I'd made things harder. Phoenix opened his mouth to argue. Then I saw the cabinet. It was standing in the living room beside Grandma's brown sectional, right where the lamp usually sat. Water dripped off its black sides onto the carpet. The extension cord trailed across the floor and disappeared behind the couch, plugged into the outlet Grandma used for her vacuum. The screen glowed. It still showed the top-down map of the house. 3 white squares stood in the kitchen. 1 for me, 1 for Phoenix, 1 for Megan. The red figure was in the hallway. "It followed us," Phoenix whispered. On the screen, the red sprite moved into Grandma's bedroom. I heard floorboards creak above the rain. The figure crossed to the bathroom, paused, then entered the small front room where Grandpa kept his fishing magazines and unpaid bills stacked on a metal TV tray. The locked file box sat on the floor in the corner. I'd seen it a dozen times and never thought about what was inside. The red figure stopped at the file box. A sharp metallic pop echoed through the house. It sounded like a screwdriver breaking a cheap latch. Megan started crying. Phoenix clamped his hand over her mouth, not hard, just firm enough to muffle the sound. His eyes were wide and fixed on the cabinet screen. I picked up the phone again. My fingers found 911 on the keypad. I pressed the buttons and raised the receiver to my ear. The cabinet clicked. The red figure left Grandpa's room. It entered the hallway. It moved toward the kitchen, where 3 white squares stood near the back door. I pulled Megan toward the laundry room. Phoenix grabbed my shoulder and pointed at the screen. The hallway closet door was opening. On the map, the black rectangle that marked the closet swung wide. The red figure stepped inside and vanished. For 1 second, the screen showed only the 3 white squares, the empty hallway, and the open closet. Then a new white square appeared in the living room. It sat exactly where the cabinet stood in the real house. The closet rectangle turned red. The swollen hallway closet door beside us opened from the inside. Through the crack, I saw a pale plastic face. It wasn't a Halloween mask from the drugstore. It looked like a ship captain from an old restaurant sign, with a pointed beard painted below a fixed smile and blue eyes that didn't blink. Strips of gray rope hung from the scalp, wet and heavy, dripping onto a black raincoat. Behind the mask, someone breathed. Slow, steady, Phoenix shoved me toward the back door. I grabbed Megan's hand and ran. We hit the door together and spilled out into the rain. Megan's bare feet slapped the wet steps. She'd kicked her shoes off under the Pizza Hut table an hour ago, and there was no time to go back for them. Phoenix pulled us away from the house, not toward the restaurant, toward the crawl space. I knew where he was going before he said it. The hatch was under the back porch, hidden behind warped lattice that Grandpa had been meaning to replace for years. I'd hidden there once when my mom came home drunk and started throwing things in the kitchen. The space was shallow and damp, but it was dark, and you couldn't see it from the alley unless you knew where to look. Phoenix dragged the plywood panel aside. Megan crawled in first. I went after her, my knees sinking into cold mud. Phoenix squeezed in last and pulled the panel back into place. We lay in the dark. Rain hammered the porch boards above us. I could feel Megan shaking against my side. Phoenix held both her hands, squeezing tight enough to keep her from making noise. Footsteps crossed the porch. They were slow, heavy. The boards flexed under the weight, sagging so close to my face I could see the grain in the wood. Splinters hung from the underside where nails had worked loose over the years. The person above us stopped at the edge of the porch. Then they descended the steps. I pressed my cheek into the mud and looked through the gap in the lattice. Black work boots stood in the alley, 6 feet away. Water ran off the laces and pooled in the gravel. The boots didn't move. Megan's breathing hitched. Phoenix squeezed her hands harder. The boots stood there for a full minute, maybe longer. I couldn't tell. Time stretched out in the dark until I wasn't sure if I was still breathing or just holding my chest still and waiting for it to be over. Then the boots turned. They moved away from the porch, slow and deliberate, heading back toward the Pizza Hut. Grandma found us after dark. I heard her voice first, calling my name from the alley behind the porch. Benny was scratching at the lattice so hard his claws left grooves in the wood. Phoenix had one hand clamped over Megan's mouth because she kept trying to answer, and I could feel my own heartbeat in my ears like something trying to punch its way out. When Grandma pulled the plywood panel aside and saw us lying there in the mud, she didn't ask questions. She just reached in and dragged Megan out first, then me, then Phoenix. The Pizza Hut parking lot was full of police cars. An ambulance sat crooked across 2 spaces with its back doors open. I could see Lexi standing near the front entrance, talking to an officer and crying into her sleeve. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt was slick and black under the streetlights. Grandma walked us straight to one of the patrol cars. She told the officer her grandchildren had been inside the restaurant when something happened. She didn't say what. The officer was tall, with short gray hair and a tired face. He introduced himself as Officer Paul Renner. He crouched down so he was at my level and asked if I was hurt. I wasn't, not on the outside. Officer Renner brought us into the Pizza Hut and sat us at one of the booths near the front windows. The dining room smelled like wet carpet and burned cheese. Travis was already gone, taken to the hospital. Lexi sat at the counter with her head in her hands. The party room door was open, and I could see two officers standing near the back wall, looking at the space where the arcade cabinet had been. It wasn't there anymore. Officer Renner asked what had happened. Phoenix said someone had plugged in an old game cabinet and it showed the inside of Grandma's house. Megan said the little red man had a hat. I said the person in the closet was wearing a mask. Officer Renner wrote everything down, but I could see his pen slow when Phoenix described the cabinet screen changing from the Pizza Hut to Grandma's kitchen. When I told him the back door had been unlocked even though Grandma told us to keep it locked, he underlined something twice. He asked if we had seen anyone carry the cabinet out of the restaurant. We hadn't. He asked if we had seen anyone inside Grandma's house before we ran to the porch. We had, but only through the closet door, and only for a second. Officer Renner closed his notebook. He told us to wait in the booth and walked over to Lexi. I watched him ask her something, and she shook her head, then pointed toward the party room. She was saying she didn't know. She kept saying it. Grandma drove us back to her house after Officer Renner said we could go. The back door was still unlocked. Inside, the hallway closet door stood open. Grandma walked straight to it and looked inside, then turned and told us to wait in the kitchen. Phoenix sat at the table with his arms crossed. Megan climbed into my lap and buried her face in my shirt. Benny curled up under the table and wouldn't come out even when Grandma tried to coax him with a piece of ham. 2 officers came through the back door without knocking. One of them was Officer Renner. The other was younger, with a shaved head and a camera. They went into the hallway, then into Grandpa's room. I heard drawers opening. I heard the younger officer say something about a file box. Officer Renner came back into the kitchen and asked Grandma if anything was missing. She didn't know yet. The hallway closet door was still open when they left. Grandma shut it, tested the latch, then put a chair under the knob. She made us hot chocolate even though it was summer. She told us we were safe. She told us Grandpa would be home soon. He came home after midnight. I was supposed to be asleep, but I was lying on the couch in the living room with Benny pressed against my legs. I heard the back door open and Grandpa's boots on the linoleum. Then I heard Grandma's voice, low and sharp. She said, "Where were you?" Grandpa said, "Working." She said, "The police were here. Someone broke Peter's file box. They think it was the same person who hurt Travis." Grandpa didn't answer right away. I heard the fridge open, then close. Then he said, "What did they take?" "I don't know. You never told me what was in there. Old bills. Receipts. Nothing worth stealing. Then why would someone break in for it?" "I don't know, Kim." Her voice went quieter, but I could still hear it. "The kids said someone was in the closet. They said he was wearing a mask. Kids see things. Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't do that. Don't pretend this is normal." Grandpa's chair scraped against the floor. He said, "I'm tired. We'll talk in the morning." Grandma said, "We'll talk now." But they didn't. I heard Grandpa walk down the hallway to his room and shut the door. Grandma stayed in the kitchen for a long time. When she finally came into the living room, she saw I was awake. She didn't say anything. She just sat on the arm of the couch and put one hand on my head until I fell asleep. The next morning, Officer Renner came back. He asked Grandpa about the file box again. Grandpa said he kept old tax papers in it, maybe some receipts from jobs he'd done over the years. Officer Renner asked if any of those jobs involved arcade cabinets. Grandpa said, "I've hauled a few." "Why?" Officer Renner said, "The kids described a cabinet that was in the Pizza Hut party room yesterday. Lexi Graham says you were asked to remove it twice. I was. Never got around to it. Do you know where it came from? No idea. It was already there when I started doing work for them. Officer Renner wrote something down. Then he asked if Grandpa had noticed anything unusual about the cabinet. Grandpa said he hadn't. He said it was unplugged, covered in dust, and not worth the gas money to haul it to the dump. Officer Renner left after that. I watched him from the top of the stairs. When the back door closed, Grandpa went into the hallway and opened the closet. He stood there for a long time, looking at the floor. Then he bent down and picked something up. It was small and red. A joystick ball. He turned it over in his hand, then slipped it into his pocket. That's when he saw me. He looked up the stairs, and our eyes met. He didn't say anything. He just held one finger to his lips. I never told Grandma. The months after that summer felt like watching a door close in slow motion. Travis left Pizza Hut before the end of August. Lexi stopped waving when she saw Grandma at the grocery store. Phoenix refused to talk about the cabinet, even when Megan woke up crying and said the red man was back. He told her it was a dream. He told her we had all been scared and confused. He told her to stop bringing it up. By the time school started, the story had shrunk. Adults said it had been a storm, a break-in, and 3 kids who got spooked in the dark. Travis said he slipped on a wet patch near the walk-in cooler. Lexi said she didn't see anyone move the cabinet. Officer Renner said there were no usable fingerprints, no forced entry, and no evidence of anything stolen except some old envelopes from Grandpa's file box. Megan remembered the mask. She remembered the pale face and the gray rope hair, but when she told people, they smiled and said she had a good imagination. After a while, she stopped telling people. She just said she'd had a bad dream. Phoenix joined the Coast Guard the week after he graduated high school. He didn't come back to Westport except for holidays, and even then he stayed at his parents' place in Hoquiam. I saw him at Grandma's house once, the Christmas after he enlisted. He was taller, broader, and he didn't look at the hallway closet when he walked past it. I asked him if he ever thought about the cabinet. He said no. I said, not even once? He said, it was 15 years ago, Raph, let it go. But I couldn't, because every time I walked into Grandma's house, I looked at that closet door. Every time I passed the old Pizza Hut, I thought about the party room. Every time I saw a red joystick in an arcade, I felt my chest tighten. Grandma died in January. Pneumonia, the doctor said. She went into the hospital on a Tuesday and didn't come home. I was there when it happened, sitting in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand. She didn't say anything at the end. She just squeezed my fingers once, then let go. Grandpa was still alive, but barely. He was in Pacific Care and Rehabilitation Center in Aberdeen, and his mind was slipping. I visited him once after Grandma's funeral. He asked me if anyone had been around the old house. I said no. He asked again 10 minutes later. I said no again. Then he looked at me and said, "You need to check the closet." I didn't go back after that. Nearly 17 years after that summer, I was 29 and delivering food for DoorDash and Uber Eats. I worked the triangle between Aberdeen, Hoquiam, and Westport, taking whatever orders came through. I rented a single room above the closed Westport bait and tackle storefront near the marina. The rent was cheap, the room was damp, the lease was month to month. It was the kind of place you lived when you couldn't afford to stay anywhere else. The room had a kitchenette with a hot plate, a bathroom with a shower that only worked if you held the handle at the right angle, and a mattress on the floor. The window faced the marina. At night, I could hear the boats creaking against the docks and the foghorns calling through the dark. I came home on a Thursday in November after a 12-hour shift. It was raining again. It was always raining. My phone was dead. My ribs ached from carrying too many orders up too many stairs, and I was too tired to care about anything except sleep. That's when I saw the package. It was leaning against my door, wrapped in brown packing paper. My name was written on it in block letters, Clyde Morales. No return address, no postage, no courier label, just my name. I stood in the narrow space between my mattress and the kitchenette counter, staring at the brown paper package, leaning against my door. The hallway bulb had burned out 2 weeks ago, so the only light came from the street lamp outside my window, filtering through rain that hadn't stopped since morning. The package was flat, roughly the size of a hardcover book, wrapped in plain brown paper with my name written across the front in block letters. No return address, no postage, no courier label. I picked it up, light, maybe 2 pounds. I set it on the counter and unwrapped it slowly, pulling the tape loose at the corners. Inside was a miniature arcade control box, the kind hobbyists built from kits and sold online. A Raspberry Pi was mounted inside a black plastic housing, no bigger than a cigar box. A red joystick stuck up from the left side. One white button sat on the right, its surface yellowed around the edges like old plastic. An HDMI cable coiled underneath, held with a twist tie. A USB drive was taped to the bottom with clear packing tape. No brand markings, no manufacturer sticker, just a piece of masking tape stuck to the top, and someone had written on it in black marker, Walter Keene's turn. I set the control box down and looked at the USB drive. Small, generic, the kind you could buy in a 10-pack at Shopcart. My ribs ached from standing too long. I'd worked 12 hours today, most of it in the rain, and my back was tight from carrying bags up apartment stairs. I should have eaten something. I should have called Paul Renner before I touched the package. I should have left it in the hallway and walked away. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed. Paul answered on the third ring. "Clyde, hey, sorry to call so late. You're fine. What's going on?" I looked at the control box. The red joystick caught the street lamp light. I came home tonight and found a package at my door. No postage, no return address, just my name on it. Paul didn't say anything for a moment. Then, what's inside? Some kind of homemade arcade thing. Raspberry Pi, joystick, button. There's a USB drive taped to it and a piece of tape on top that says Walter Keene's turn. Walter Keene. Yeah, you know that name? No, Paul was quiet again. I heard a chair creak on his end. Do not plug that thing in. Don't test it. Don't open the drive. Don't touch the controls. I'll call someone active and have them collect it. Okay, I mean it, Clyde. Leave it alone until an officer gets there. I will. Good, I'll make the call now. Someone should be by within the hour. Thanks. I ended the call and set the phone on the counter. The control box sat under the overhead light, small and harmless. The joystick was the same shade of red as the one from Grandma's closet, the one Grandpa had pocketed before Paul came back for another look. I'd seen him do it from the stairs. He'd noticed me watching and held one finger to his lips. I picked up the HDMI cable and plugged it into my television. The screen came on black. No logo, no startup animation, just black for 3 or 4 seconds while the speaker hummed faintly. Then the screen redrew itself into a crude top-down map, green and gray pixels forming blocky shapes against a black background. I recognized the layout immediately. The kitchenette, the mattress against the far wall, the bathroom in the corner, the stairwell leading down to the bait shop, the front window overlooking the street, my room. A white square stood beside the bed. I stepped left. The white square stepped left. I stepped right. It stepped right. The game wasn't replaying memory. It was live. A text file opened in the corner of the screen, white letters on black. The first line appeared in broken, misspelled English. Walter Keane. You took from the cabinet man in 1994. Then the letters flickered and corrected themselves, one word at a time, as if someone was typing from another room and fixing mistakes as they went. Walter Keane. You took from the cabinet man in 1994. I didn't move. The text kept appearing. You hid what was not yours. You refused every request to return it. The first time, you let children stand between you, and the debt. Raphael Keane is not a child now. Raphael, my legal first name, the one only my mother and school records used. Everyone else called me Clyde, my middle name, because I'd asked them to when I was 8 and tired of teachers mispronouncing it. The text file closed. A video file launched. It didn't show filmed footage. It showed old arcade graphics, cleaner than the cabinet from 2009 but still crude, still top-down, still limited to a handful of colors. The first frame displayed the Pizza Hut party room from that stormy afternoon 17 years ago. 3 white squares stood around a black rectangle. The cabinet. 1 square moved toward it. A small red figure appeared at the bottom of the screen, then crossed into the kitchen. A green sprite stood beside the oven. The red figure touched it, and the green sprite collapsed into a pile of flashing pixels. Travis, the video continued without sound. It showed Grandma's back door opening. It showed Grandpa's file box breaking. It showed the hallway closet turning red. Then it showed 3 tiny white squares crawling under the porch, while the red figure stood at the edge, exactly where the black boots had stood in real life. I couldn't look away. The video cut to newer graphics. The layout changed to show a building I recognized from last winter. Fernhill Funeral Home in Aberdeen. Rows of pixel chairs filled the main room. A coffin-sized rectangle sat at the front. Small white squares filled some of the chairs. A red figure stood outside the building, across the street, unmoving, Grandma's funeral. Then the screen changed again. It showed a care unit room with a bed, a chair, and a window. A white square sat in the chair. The red figure stood outside the window, pressed against the glass. Grandpa, at Pacific Care. The video returned to the present map of my room. The kitchenette, the mattress, the stairwell. The white square stood beside the television, exactly where I was standing. A red figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs. I yanked the HDMI cable from the television. The screen went black. The room fell silent except for the rain against the window and my own breathing. Then the control box speaker clicked. Just once. Soft, metallic, the television was black, while the unplugged control box kept clicking. I shoved the USB drive into my pocket because it was the only thing that proved Peter had anything to do with this. Grabbed the tire iron I kept by the door after too many late-night deliveries to houses with no porch lights, and called 911. The line rang twice. 911. What is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was steady. I forced mine to match it. Someone is inside the building. What's your location? I gave her the address above the closed bait shop. I gave her my name. I told her I lived upstairs and that someone had just broken the lower door. Officers are being sent from Westport. Stay away from the stairwell if you can. Keep the line open. I kept the phone pressed to my ear. I could hear her typing. She asked if I was injured. I told her no. She asked if the person had said anything. I opened my mouth to answer. 3 heavy knocks hit the door at the bottom of the interior stairs. I had locked that door when I came in. I always locked it. The first blow cracked the frame. Wood splintered loud enough that I heard it through the phone. The dispatcher asked what the sound was. The second blow knocked the deadbolt plate loose. Metal clattered against the landing. The third blow opened the door. The speaker in the control box clicked. It clicked again. It clicked once for each stair. I dropped the phone. It hit the counter and kept transmitting. I moved behind the kitchenette with the tire iron raised. My ribs throbbed where I had slammed into the stove earlier. The clicking kept climbing. 12 steps from the lower landing to my door. I counted them. 8, 9, 10. The upstairs door opened inward. A man stepped into the room. He wore a black raincoat that dripped onto my floor, black work boots, gloves, and the same pale captain mask I had seen through the gap in my grandmother's hallway closet 17 years ago. The beard was painted on in sharp black strokes. The eyes were painted blue, staring and flat. The mouth was fixed in a smile that did not move when he breathed. Gray rope hair hung wet over his collar, like something pulled from the harbor. In one gloved hand, he carried a short-handled sledgehammer. In the other, he held a red plastic joystick ball. The same one Peter had pocketed from the closet floor in 2009. The same one I had watched him slip into his jacket while Officer Renner stood in the kitchen asking Grandma if she kept the back door locked. The masked man did not rush me. He set the joystick ball on the floor between us. It rolled slightly, then stopped. He spoke through the mask. His voice was calm, measured like he had said these words before. Peter Morales still has what belongs inside the cabinet. I tightened my grip on the tire iron. My hand was shaking. I could hear the dispatcher's voice through the phone on the counter, asking if I was still there. The masked man took one step forward. He taught his grandson to steal time by hiding behind old women and children. Another step. If you want this night to end, take the box to Peter Morales and make him play. He stepped around the counter. I swung. The tire iron hit the captain mask hard enough to crack one painted cheek. The impact jarred up through my wrists. His head snapped sideways. But he did not fall. He turned back toward me, and the cracked cheek split wider. I saw skin underneath. Human skin. Not plastic all the way through. He drove the sledgehammer into my ribs. The blow knocked me backward into the stove. My spine hit the edge. Air left my lungs in one sharp sound I did not recognize as my own voice. I dropped the tire iron. It clattered across the linoleum. The masked man raised the sledgehammer again. I grabbed the control box by its cable and yanked. The Raspberry Pi tore loose from the casing with the snap of solder and plastic. Wires dangled. The speaker went silent. But the television flashed back on without being connected. No HDMI cable, no power running to it. The screen filled with the live map of the room. The red figure stood directly over the white square. I looked at the screen, then at the masked man. He was staring at the television, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something I could not hear. On the screen, the room began redrawing itself. The kitchenette, the bathroom, the stairwell, and one new doorway that did not exist in the real wall. A black rectangle beside the bathroom, perfectly square, perfectly dark. The masked man turned toward it. I shoved the broken control box into his face and pushed. He stumbled backward. His boot caught the joystick cable. He tripped. His shoulder hit the stairwell railing. The old wood cracked. He twisted, trying to catch himself. The railing broke. He dropped through the gap. His body hit the lower landing with a sound like a bag of tools thrown from a truck bed. Wood splintered. The sledgehammer clattered down the stairs. I stood at the top, gasping, staring down at the space where he had fallen. The lower landing was empty. The sledgehammer was still there. The cracked captain mask lay face up on the floor, smiling at nothing. But the man was gone. I heard sirens outside. The broken stairwell railing hung over the gap where the masked man fell. The officers found me outside in the rain. I don't remember walking down the exterior stairs, but I must have because I was standing on the gravel beside the bait shop when the patrol car pulled in, its lights turning the wet pavement blue and red. I was barefoot. The USB drive was still in my pocket, and I was coughing blood into my sleeve. Officer Carla Voss came toward me first. She was asking me something, but the words didn't land right. I pointed at the door. Upstairs, I said. He fell. Miguel Harlan went inside with his flashlight out. I heard him climb the interior stairs, heard him call Carla's name. She stayed with me, one hand on my shoulder, asking if I could breathe. I could. It just hurt. When Miguel came back down, he wasn't holding anyone. The lower stairwell was empty. The broken railing hung over the gap where the man had fallen through, and the sledgehammer lay on the landing beside pieces of splintered wood. The cracked captain mask sat face up near the bottom step, its painted smile split down one cheek. But the red joystick ball was gone. Carla went upstairs to look at my room while Miguel stayed with me. I heard her moving around up there, opening the bathroom door, checking the kitchenette. When she came back down, she was carrying the control box in a plastic evidence bag. It was only a cracked shell. The Raspberry Pi was gone. The circuit board was gone. The cable hung loose like a severed cord. "Did you see him leave?" Miguel asked. "No. Did he say anything before he fell?" I tried to remember. The man had spoken through the mask, calm and flat, but the words had blurred under the sound of my own pulse. I shook my head. Carla knelt beside me. "We're going to get you to the hospital. Can you walk to the car?" I could. They took the mask, the sledgehammer, the package wrapping, and my statement. At Grays Harbor Community Hospital, a doctor wrapped my ribs and told me I was lucky nothing had punctured. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like I had been hit by something that shouldn't exist and had survived only because I'd broken the one piece of evidence that might have explained it. The next morning, Paul Renner came to see me. He wasn't in uniform. He sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at me the way he had looked at me when I was 12, like he was trying to decide how much of the truth I could carry. "The USB drive didn't work," he said. "Corrupted files. Nothing we could recover." I nodded. I'd expected that. Paul leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Peter's file box bothered me for years. He changed his story 3 times about what was missing." "What did he do?" I asked. "Before, what was his job?" "He worked maintenance in arcades, restaurants, and coin-op laundries up and down the coast." Paul rubbed his jaw. "That doesn't explain this." I thought about the cabinet in Grandma's living room, dripping rainwater onto the carpet. I thought about the man in the mask standing at the edge of the porch while we hid in the mud. I thought about Grandpa's hand closing over the red joystick ball and the way he'd held one finger to his lips. "He took something," I said. "Didn't he?" Paul looked at me for a long time. Then he stood. "Get some rest, Clyde. I'll come back if we find anything." He didn't come back. 2 days later, Grandpa died at Pacific Care and Rehabilitation Center. I hadn't spoken to him since the package arrived. I hadn't asked him what he'd done, or what he'd hidden, or why the man in the mask had waited 17 years to come back. Now I never would. Heather Milam, one of the nurses, found me in the hallway outside his room. She was young, tired, and kind in the way people are when they've seen too much death to be afraid of it anymore. "He was agitated last night," she said. "He kept saying someone finally found the Player 2 piece. I didn't ask what that meant. I already knew. In Grandpa's bedside drawer, I found an empty red velvet pouch and a folded Pizza Hut receipt from July 2009. I opened the receipt. On the back, in Grandpa's handwriting, was Grandma's old address and the words, "Not the machine, the man who comes with it." I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. Phoenix flew in for the funeral but wouldn't stay in Westport overnight. He stood beside me at the graveside, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw tight. When it was over, he shook my hand and said he was sorry. Then he left. Megan came with her husband. She stood outside the chapel holding my hand so tightly I thought she might break something. Inside the building, a child in the next room laughed at a phone game. Megan's grip tightened until her knuckles went white. "It's okay," I said. She didn't let go. No one found the man in the captain mask. No one found the missing circuit board from the control box. The investigation went cold within a week, filed under unsolved assaults with insufficient evidence. Paul called me once to say he was sorry. I told him it wasn't his fault. I didn't know whose fault it was. The closed Pizza Hut building on West Ocean Avenue was gutted for renovation 3 months later. Workers told police they found no hidden cabinet, no old wiring, and nothing in the party room except water damage and mouse droppings. I moved out of the room above the bait shop before my ribs healed. Every breath still felt like someone was tightening a belt around my chest, but I couldn't stay there. Not with the cracked railing hanging loose over the landing, not with the memory of that sledgehammer punching through plaster where my head had been. The landlord didn't argue when I said I was leaving early. He just handed me back half the deposit and told me to lock up when I cleared out. I kept delivering. Rent doesn't wait for explanations, and the hospital bills came in thick envelopes with payment schedules printed on the back. I drove the same routes around Aberdeen and Hoquiam, dropped food on the same porches, smiled through the same half-open doors. The app didn't care that my hands shook when I passed the Westport turnoff after sunset. It just kept pinging orders. But I stopped taking anything from restaurants with arcade machines, even the new ones. The bright ones with card readers and prize tickets and kids crowding around racing games in clean lobbies. I'd see the glow through the window while waiting for an order, and my thumb would cancel before the dispatcher could confirm. I told myself it was because those places took longer to bag orders. I knew that wasn't why. I avoided West Ocean Avenue after dark. During the day it was just another street with closed storefronts and faded awnings. but at night the streetlights left gaps between the buildings that felt too wide. I'd take the long way around through residential blocks, even when it added 10 minutes to a delivery. The app's algorithm started routing me differently. I let it. Weeks passed. Grandma's house sat empty, while the estate paperwork crawled through probate. Phoenix called once to say the buyer's inspection had cleared and closing was scheduled for mid-December. He asked if I wanted anything from inside before they emptied it. I said no. Then I drove to Westport the next morning anyway. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The yellow paint had faded to the color of old newspapers, and the front steps sagged where the support beam had rotted through. The for sale sign in the yard had a red pending sticker across the bottom. I parked on the street and sat in the car for a while, watching rain bead on the windshield. The realtor had left the lockbox hanging from the front door handle. I knew the code because Phoenix had texted it to me after the inspection, even though I'd told him I didn't need it. My hands were steady when I punched the numbers in. The key turned smooth. Inside, the house smelled like dust and old carpet glue. The brown sectional was gone. The kitchen table was gone. The sewing table, the dog bed, the vacuum cleaner, all of it hauled away, or donated, or thrown in a dumpster behind shopping cart. The yellow linoleum in the kitchen looked gray in the weak light coming through the windows. Someone had patched the water stain on the living room ceiling, but the outline still showed through. I stood in the hallway. The closet door was still there, swollen in its frame the way it had been since I was a kid. The wood had warped so badly over the years that the paint cracked along the bottom edge. I could see the outline of the old latch Grandpa had installed after the original one broke. I pulled the door open. It stuck halfway, the way it always had. I had to brace my shoulder against the frame and yank hard enough that my ribs lit up like someone had kicked them again. The door scraped across the floor and swung wide. The closet was empty. No coats, no boxes of Christmas lights, no vacuum hose coiled in the corner. Just bare walls and a wooden floor that had gone dark from years of damp air seeping through the baseboard. The shelf Grandpa had mounted above the rod was still there, but the rod itself was gone, probably taken out during the estate cleanout. I stepped inside. The floor creaked under my weight. The back wall was close enough that I could touch it without stretching. I crouched down, balancing on the balls of my feet, and looked at the wood. At first I didn't see it. The grain was too dark, the light from the hallway too weak. Then I shifted left, and the angle changed. Someone had scratched a small square into the wood at the back of the closet. It was shallow, no deeper than a thumbnail dragged hard across the grain, but the edges were clean, precise, the size of a pixel on an old arcade screen. Inside the square, someone had painted it red. The paint was fresh. It hadn't faded or chipped. It looked like it had been done yesterday. I stayed crouched there for a long time, staring at that tiny red square. The house was quiet around me. No foghorns. No traffic from West Ocean Avenue. Just the sound of rain starting to tap against the roof. I stood up. My knees cracked. I stepped out of the closet and pulled the door shut behind me. It stuck again, the way it always had. I left it that way. Outside, the rain picked up. I locked the front door, put the key back in the lockbox, and walked to my car. The for sale sign swayed in the wind. The red pending sticker stayed stuck to the bottom. I drove back to Aberdeen with the heater on and the radio off. My ribs ached. My hands were steady on the wheel. The app pinged twice before I reached the city limits. I let both orders time out. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while, watching the rain run down the windshield. Then I went inside, made coffee, and waited for the next shift to start. The red square stayed in the closet. I didn't go back to check.